Okay, I've got 5 o'clock, so let's go ahead and call this board meeting to order at 5 p.m. on October 13th. I'd like to welcome everyone that's joining our Zoom call and gonna watch us maybe later. Introduce a few of the folks on the call. We have directors Clausen, Eastham, Etsy, Godwin, Malone, and Williams. We have Superintendent Matt Degner and Recording Secretary Kim Colvin. A little reminder that as a regular board meeting, we won't be in real time answering questions via the Q&A or the chat session, but there is a chance for community comment today, where you will have 4 minutes to speak on topics pertaining to the district. Before we move into the community comment, we do have right away our student representative update, and so we're trying to see who all was possibly here yet because we didn't see too many. I do see Adina Vorde from West High, so if Aditi, if you would like to start, we can start with you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Hope you can hear me.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. My name is Adina Vorde. I'm a senior at West High this year and also the co-school board rep. So despite the unusual circumstances, West is already off to a successful and busy start this first month of school. West has created a virtual club fair, and so many clubs such as Science Olympiad, BPA, and Robotics have already begun weekly virtual meetings and started preparing for their respective seasons. West High's theater program has already announced its 2 fall radio shows and spring musical and released their respective cast lists as well. Additionally, this is West High's first year of a new club, which is the Black Student Union, centered around supporting and encouraging Black students at West High. West Side Story, West High's student-led news publication, is also off to a great start. The web domain has already earned one of six distinguished site badges, and the overall publication has received 3 Best of Snow awards for written articles that have been published. The print section of West Side Story has also exported their first issue just last week, and so this upcoming Friday, copies will be published and distributed throughout the community and the school. Additionally, West High is also working with colleges and universities to provide juniors and seniors weekly opportunities for virtual college fairs, campus tours, and Q&As with admissions officers. And similarly, West is also promoting other opportunities for students, such as the upcoming World Affairs Seminar and Kirkwood Learning Center job shadowing opportunities. So other than that, the hybrid cohort is also getting settled in to their part-time in-person classes cycle, and West's online section is also continuing its routine, which I think students and teachers are both still getting used to. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you for having me this evening.
Thank you very much, Aditi. I'm looking and I don't see any of our other school reps there. I'll give you a second. If you are a school rep and you're here to give a report, perhaps you could click the raise hand button and you'll kind of shoot to the top of our attendees list and we'll know that you're there. All right, Jacob, well, at least I know who Jacob is. So Jacob is going to talk with us, Kim. All right, Jacob, are you ready?
Begun showing our PBIS Bolts Matrix videos that were made by NHS members during homeroom. These videos are used to describe and provide ways to implement the parts of the Bolts Matrix, belonging, ownership, leadership, teamwork, and safety, into our lives at Liberty. In addition, our NHS members also created videos that provide ways to successfully navigate the new hybrid and online models, covering topics such as how to navigate Canvas, manage time properly, reach out to teachers for help and studying tips. Next, Liberty's administration has reached out to NHS and asked us to resume our tutoring and homework help sessions that we have held for the past 2 years. We plan to begin holding these optional tutoring sessions during homeroom with meetings held over Zoom. In the days before we resumed in-person classes, Liberty offered a few opportunities for new and returning students to go on school tours led by NHS members, in which they were shown around the school and informed about new policies. These policies included the introduction of one-way hallways, limited drinking fountain use that is limited to refillable water bottles only, lunchroom procedures, and others. These tours we held helped us to safely and smoothly transition back to in-person learning while also removing some of the fear of the unknown that students who had never attended Liberty before had felt. While extracurriculars have been limited, they are slowly beginning to resume while taking necessary precautions. In addition to sports beginning to allow more fans, other clubs such as the Drama Department, Best Buddies, and BPA are beginning to hold virtual meetings for the upcoming year. And that is all I have for you today.
All right, thank you, Jacob. Are there any other student reps here from either City or Tate? All right. It does not look like it. So we can move into our community comment portion. As I mentioned, if you would like to speak, you can use the raise hand feature like we just did, and I will call on you and Kim will give you the rights to speak, and you will have 4 minutes to say what you need to say. So is anybody interested in making some comments today? All right, we got one. Looks like, I don't know if it's Noel or Noel Meyer.
It's Noel Meyer.
Right.
And I didn't know I don't know if we have a spot in this or not, but our family was appealing a open enrollment application. And I was looking to have the board review it and make a judgment on it. So I don't know exactly how that process goes. Just
there is an official appeal process. As it's, I don't know that I'm the best to answer exactly how that goes, but after it's officially been, the request has officially been denied, it can go through the appeals process. And I believe someone from the admin team would be the best to get in touch with you after that happens, because I do believe the original request is on the agenda tonight.
okay, so we're just waiting for you to review it tonight on this meeting. It's not in part of the commentary of this open part.
That is correct.
Okay. Well, then that was it. I guess when do you do that in this meeting?
All of the transfer requests are as part of the consent agenda at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is there anyone else? All right, we will move into the agenda and move to the agenda approval item. So I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move that we approve tonight's agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, we can move into the consent agenda. I don't know if anybody had any questions on the bill that they'd like to throw out there.
Yeah, I had a couple questions that were answered. One about the maintenance contract, equipment maintenance, and I should have the other one right in front of me, but I don't. But both my questions were answered.
All right.
I also reviewed the bills this period and I didn't have any, JP flagged of me all the two things that I saw.
All right. Are there any items that directors would like to pull from consent?
I want to pull 6 and 11.
All right. Anyone else? All right, then I would entertain a motion.
I move that the consent agenda be approved, pulling or absent items 6 and 11.
Second.
All right, any questions? Any further discussion? All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you. So item number 6, Lisa?
So I just wanted to pull that to highlight one of our recommended for hires. It's to fill the vacant West Social Studies position, and we are being recommended to hire Sydney DeBoer. We've talked about growing our own and bringing our own in, and I know that Sydney is a City High graduate. She was the inaugural City High mock trial team, so that is a near and dear to my heart. And so I just wanted to point out that we are trying to recruit some of the best and brightest who graduate from the Iowa City Public School District. Great job. I am sure that there are plenty of other hires that I didn't coach in mock trial. And so I don't want to slight those individuals in the least bit, but I was so happy to see Sydney's name. I wish her all the best luck in that position, and I think she's going to do it. So with that, I would move that we approve the item 6, the certified, the personnel agenda.
Second.
All right, Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
And then item 11, the United Action for Youth contract.
That I was hoping maybe Matt or Kate or Dustin could talk to us more about how this is going to interplay with the care assessment coordinator position and some of the long-term vision here.
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. I think it's a great opportunity for us to introduce Dustin to you guys this evening. We haven't had a chance to do that in a formal way. And so him and Kate are here to talk a little bit tonight about where we're at with care assessment and our modeling, and then what the purpose of this contract is with that team. So from there, I'm going to turn it over to Kate and Dustin.
Okay, and I will go ahead and turn it over to Dustin and let him introduce himself to you and share some progress that we're making in the area of care assessment.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dustin Gearing. This is my first time meeting all of you, and I'm happy to be here. And I'm actually super pleased to be with the district, and I hope we can do a lot of good things going forward. I'm excited about what we're doing, and I'm hoping we get this thing rolling a lot quicker than it has been with COVID and everything's kind of, things have been more important, kind of at the forefront, but I'm hoping we get going here a lot faster, and I'm really excited about what we're doing. Just a little bit of background on me. Like I said, I had a lot of people in my job interview, but I don't know who was all there because there's so many screens. I worked in law enforcement for roughly about 10 years. I did private protection for about 6 or 7 years there. And then about 2012, I decided to switch gears and go into education. A lot of the driving force behind that was I would deal with youth quite often, or students quite often, in my line of work as a police officer. And I thought, what if somebody or something intervened a little earlier? Would I be having this interaction with a student now? So it was kind of my motivation to say, instead of thinking and talking about something that I saw as an issue, maybe to take some action. So about that time, I kind of reversed courses and I got into education, did some teaching, and then this job came up, and I thought that it was a fantastic blend of both of my disciplines per se. So I decided to pursue this job opportunity, and that's kind of how I ended up sitting in front of you here today. As far as what we've been working on, it's been kind of chaotic with COVID and Zooming, and making contacts has been sporadic at best sometimes, especially when I don't get to sit in a room with all of you and make that personal connection. I see the screen. So it's been a little difficult and a little bit of an adjustment, but since the summer, I've kind of immersed myself in learning the Dewey Cornell model and the Virginia model, or however you decide you want to call it. And this is the model that the safety committee recommended last spring. So I really dove into that. Got the manuals, been online, looked at the forms. It's pretty vast. So I've been trying to immerse myself in that as much as possible. Also, we were able to take a look at some other communities that have used this model, and we were really impressed with Lincoln, Nebraska. Lincoln, Nebraska, they took this model and they tweaked it just a little bit to fit their community, with a huge focus on prevention. And that's really what the basis of the system is. It doesn't predict something that might happen. It tries to prevent it. And one of the big things that's near and dear to me and the groups that I've been working with is we really want to have a stressing on, students being a harm to themselves and also harm to others. So it's important that we have this wraparound focus when we go through this process. But like Lincoln, we really want to stay true to the Virginia model. We want to make sure that it's a research-based, fact-based process, and we can make modifications here and there based on what we are now seeking. And what I really thought was important was community input, and also looking at it with an equity lens. Something we've just started to put together a group of people from the community that we want to have some input here. But prior to that, we sought input from several departments within the district, specifically with Laura Gray in equity. We consulted student services, learning supports, and they were able to compile a list of people that they thought would have good input and a good viewpoint to include on this developmental team. So we got about 20 of them that we want to bring in and just give us some input and see how we can best make the Virginia model for our community and our district. We want it to be the best it can possibly be. So we envision this to be a short-term commitment from these people, nothing long-term, just something over the next few weeks. We've pulled representatives from, it seems like, everywhere. I have a list here. I don't want to leave anybody out. I apologize if I do. We've got Equity Advisory Committee, Black Voices Project, Disproportionate Minority Contacts, the District Equity Department, Center for Worker Justice, Mental Health, Special Education, and Disability Advocacy Group, City Council, U of I Care Assessment Team to include Eli Hodgkin and Pierre Berkson. We're gathering students from every high school, and we've also consulted building staff and administrators. The contract that's on the consent agenda tonight is starting a partnership for a short-term contract with UAY, or United Action for Youth, to help us facilitate some of those conversations with the community. Also to help us maybe find gaps in services in the community that maybe we're not seeing or we're not aware of quite yet. So they can bring their expertise to the table and help us kind of map those things out as we're in the beginning stages of getting this process going. So that's what we're looking for out of this process. I thank you guys for your time tonight and listening to me, and I hope we have great things ahead. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dustin. Remind everybody that was from the pulled United Action for Youth contract. So unless there's further questions, I'd entertain a motion to approve that item.
I move to approve the United Action for Youth contract.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, Kim, I think we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you, Kim. We can move down to our discussion items. First up, an update on where we're at with our equity items. So Matt, I will turn it over to you and the team.
Sure. So thank you. This is something we had talked about doing a recurring item with around equity in our focus to some of those commitments we acknowledged over the summer that are connected to our diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, and some of those specified action steps we would like to take to continue to move forward on. And so it doesn't seem like it was that long ago we were here talking about that, but that's the good part of this is that it'll continue to be a recurring point for us and to continue check on progress. And so tonight, I think Amy is going to start it off, and we have a few components there to update you on. And then I know Laura's going to add in some pieces around a toolkit she's worked on as well. So with that, I'll have Amy kick off the conversation. And then of course, we can take any questions you may have as well, either at the end or as we go throughout.
Thanks, Matt. So just as a reminder, on the teaching and learning side, we're going to delve deeply into 3 different areas this year. And one is looking at our discipline protocols and procedures manual. The other piece is social studies curriculum review. And then last but not least, professional development, including the toolkit that Matt was just speaking about. I'm going to take the discipline protocols and procedures. Diane and Scott will take the curriculum review, and then Laura Gray is going to take the professional development and toolkit items. A large number of the ESC directors on this call tonight, Matt and myself, met recently with Dr. Sarah Bruck, formerly U of I professor, who's helped us for the last several years with our equity grant. And we've had good discussions with Dr. Bruck about putting together a process similar to the one that was used when we updated the diversity, equity, and inclusion plan for updating our discipline protocols and procedures. And we want to take a look at this more holistically and bring together 2 items. So we want to bring into this new manual that would be created both the discipline protocols and procedures as well as positive behavior supports, our PBIS system. So we really want to expand what's there and focus on, just like Dustin was talking about earlier, the prevention or the proactive side of things as well. And as we draw a committee together to look at this, after our team has gotten together and done some deep dives on a few different things, there are 3 areas of focus that we'd like to get into. First is just a deep around our data, both our office discipline referrals as well as suspension data, and then look at the language that's currently sitting in the discipline protocols and procedures and make sure that the language isn't racist, that we remove bias from it if it's there, and that sort of thing. And then thinking about restorative practices, that's going to be a huge element for us. And restorative practices is really the bridge that helps bind those 2 ideas together, both the proactive side as well as the reactionary side that unfortunately sometimes we find ourselves in. So that's the work of the team. Like I said, we've engaged in a couple of conversations with Dr. Bruck. And as we move forward, eventually you'll see a process start to develop that looks similar to the one we used for the development of the DEI plan. So with that, I'll turn it over to Diane and Scott.
Good evening. I'll start off and Scott can fill in the holes that I leave behind. Scott and Laura Gray and I have been meeting every week with Brady Shutt. You know Brady, he's a man of many talents, but one of his talents is he is our district social studies coordinator. So Brady and the 3 of us are pulling our resources together to be able to facilitate this curriculum review. So currently we're working on establishing the committee. I know he's already reached out to several people. I think Ruthina, as a member of the board, has agreed to be on our committee, so we appreciate that. He will get staff, he will get parents and students. He's also reached out to some people from the University of Iowa who have a background in social studies. And he's going to ensure that we have a very diverse committee for this review. Additionally, he's working on collecting some data. So we're looking at data such as course enrollment data that we have in the district. And he's also designing a survey so that we will collect survey, and that will allow us to get input from a broader audience than just the committee members. So we'll have, that'll be sent out to the parents and to students and to all staff as well. So we'll get that information. We'll also bring that draft survey to our first committee meeting, just to make sure that we aren't missing any questions that we would like to ask. And then further, he's started already getting some connections with some of our publishers to see if we can start getting samples of some materials so we can start looking at those to see, you know, what we might be able to purchase in the way of materials that might help our social studies curriculum represent a more diverse population than our current one does. So we're on the road. We have a lot of work ahead of us. But we've got a good team that's getting going on it. Scott, did I miss anything or anything you'd like to add?
No, you did awesome. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you. And if there's no questions on that, I can turn it over to Laura.
Hello, everyone. So I want to go over the toolkit that was developed, and I know that you guys might remember not too long ago, we had a situation where a teacher was in the media around a lesson. And so in order to circumvent possible missteps, especially in lessons around race, slavery, things that are like especially extra sensitive right now in our current climate, I developed this toolkit to help out our staff, and we really want to wrap around our teachers during this time to help them understand that we do believe in them professionally and totally support autonomy in regards to their picking their resources. But this is just like a way for them to kind of vet their lessons using, you know, either individually or with their POC. And then we also give them the opportunity to submit lessons to our cultural proficiency team subgroup, who can also help vet lessons. And that's a confidential process there. So I'm gonna screen share to just run it through, guys. And so this is what it looks like. And it's really for our staff. It's not for students. And I preface that here in the introduction where I just kind of welcome them and thank them for what they're doing and explain what this is. And again, it is a suggestion. It's a toolkit, a way for them to like, you know, build up their trick bag around some of these things. And so here's the FAQ for them to like submit their lessons, and then it kind of answers questions about like, why would I do this? If I'm already, you know, doing something else, do I still need to do it? Have this culturally responsive teaching curriculum checklist, which is a little bit different from the multi-culturalism lens, but it's still helpful. So we have that there. We have the teacher skills and student success that I found somewhere that was really good. And then, you know, let's just say a lesson does cause harm. Here, there's some steps, and I'll just kind of click on it so you guys can see it a little bit larger, where, you know, we talk about, you know, some proactive measures that staff can take in order to offset some of the harm that might be caused. And we know that we can't guarantee that no harm will be caused because it's such a subjective and individual situation, and we don't know what else people might be going through or what might trigger them. But this is just a way to say, you know, we don't want to cause harm to our students. Let me try some of these things. And I know that some of these measures might seem like excessive to some people, but that's really the cost of making sure that your diversity feels safe and included. And so if it does happen, we have some steps for how you can empathize with students and reach out to them and even offer a circle if possible, and then communicate and reassess whether or not to continue in that lesson. And so that's just one of the examples there. But then we also have some things that I found on one of the sites around do's and don'ts for teaching slavery. And we referenced teaching tolerance, and then I came up with this like implicit bias check that educators can go through either individually or again with their PLCs. We talk about on the use of the N-word in classrooms, and specifically because at one point in time, it was politically correct to use the N-word in academic settings so that, no one really would think twice if a, professor read from a book and was non-Black and said the N-word. So at one point, that was very much acceptable, but it's just kind of letting them know, like, today that's not okay. And here's why. And here's some reasons, why, when people have the argument around, well, they use it in hip hop. Why can some students say it? Why can't some students say it? And there's just some resources here that teachers can kind of look at to get a better understanding around that so that they can have some confidence as to why we're saying what we're saying. And then we talk about racial trauma in the classroom. This thing called white supremacy culture, which I know might make some people shrug, but in reality, it's this thing about the systems of inequity that already exist. That's nobody here's fault, but that we all kind of perpetuate at times because it's what we know. And so it kind of breaks that down, the definition of that and characteristics of it, and then microaggressions and how to kind of be mindful of that to not do any harm. And so the teachers know, again, that we value them as educators. We know that they're super professional and that they take the time to plan to do it the right way. This is just one of those measures to say, here's some ideas to kind of really definitely stay out of the weeds for some of these more touchy subject areas. This too can be applicable for LGBTQ matters in lessons and in curriculum and so on and so forth. Also, one of our administrators brought up today, immigration issues, that they can apply this in the same manner. And so, yeah, it's for them. I'm gonna roll it out this week, but just wanted the board to take a look at it so that you guys can know what we're doing. And did any of you have any questions around this in particular?
Well, I have a question in general. So it means that, well, thank you for the presentation. I just want to find out whether the president's executive order on combating race and sex stereotyping affects what you, like the toolkit, the curriculum, any trainings for teachers, etc.
Yeah, I can take that one, Laura.
Yes, go ahead.
Want to add in on top of that, feel free. But thanks for that question. And that's one we're still actually working to get an answer on. So we've checked with not only our own legal counsel, but the Urban Ed network that provides us some guidance sometimes to the large school districts in the state, and then also with the local AEA. And so they're still working what that means for K-12 districts. We know that the universities received some guidance or pulled back some plans based on some of the trainings they had. And so we're still waiting to see how that might impact K-12. But we've reached out to about all the channels we can to try to get an interpretation or an impact on what that could mean for us, and just don't have a clear answer at this point. So we haven't necessarily hit pause on anything. We're going ahead with our trainings until we hear differently on that. And as soon as we would get some information on that, we'll be sure to share it with you guys. Sorry, Laura, if you had anything.
No problem. And I read the order very, very closely, and it really involves mandatory, like making the entire district do certain things and certain language around that piece when you're receiving federal funds. So like, I agree there's a gray area for some parts of it, but this toolkit is definitely voluntary. So like, they can choose to like not use it at all. Like, that's totally up to them. It's just really something to help keep people from going down a road that they didn't intend to go down. The other piece is when it does come to our professional development, because we are doing some mandatory trainings and we're talking about cultural proficiency, but you can ask anyone who's been in any of our trainings around that, I wrap around our staff. So we use a very restorative approach. We embed restorative justice and restorative practices within our trainings, because we want people to leave whole. We don't want to break people down and make people feel guilty. You know, teachers are no good to us that way. So we really do things to build up, empower, you know, kind of the opposite of what is listed in his order in regards to not wanting people to experience.
Thank you, Laura.
And I talked too about we also have the principals are going to do a mini retreat with me around culturally responsive teaching, where I want to just kind of explain to them the difference between that and like multiculturalism or multicultural and gender fair, because that's where our district is headed. And I really want them to be ahead of that as we start to roll that out and plan for next year.
So Laura, this is Charlie Eastham. Really great work. It's very impressive. Can you just talk briefly about how you think the class activity that occurred recently, how that planning for that kind of activity would fit in with what these approaches that you've outlined today?
So I'll give just an example. Like there are a couple of different checklists that people can use, but what I found from what's the name of this place? I think it's Oklahoma's racial justice site. I'm just gonna screen share one more time. Was super helpful around that. And this is something that, again, like a lot of these issues around race are fluid. So there might be a time when it wasn't a big deal, and then it is, you know, and then next week it might change a little bit then as well. But that, again, is the cost of making sure that your diversity feels included. You know, sometimes convenience is the cost. So here's like examples, do's and don'ts of teaching slavery. And like, I'm just gonna scroll down to the don'ts. And so if you look at the first couple ones, I'm gonna see if I can make it a little bit bigger. Can you guys see that okay?
Yeah, I can.
So, yeah. So don't have students imagine themselves as enslaved people. Okay, so like I would have seen that and been like, oh, maybe that's not a good idea. Okay. So that's just an example. And, you know, here's some of the examples of some of the do's. And again, this might be controversial for some folks, you know, and I can talk, you know, about that piece, but for the most part, this isn't anything new for our educators, but there might still be some who like just aren't sure. And so if you aren't really sure, and maybe you don't want to talk about it with your PLC, then you can just do it yourself.
Okay, thanks. That's really helpful.
Are you gonna, oh, go ahead, Lisa.
No, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if is there any way to track kind of the, you know, how many people use the material, that sort of thing down the road?
No, so right now, you know, the only thought that I have around just trying to capture whether or not people thought it was useful is just gathering their feedback, you know, and I can get that quarterly. But I don't want to track it in any way, shape, or form, because I also don't want it to be a compliance piece, because it's not meant to be. And, you know, so it's really for people who are like, okay, I want to make sure I'm doing it right, or let's just double check, or I'm curious, I don't know about this, or why is this way? So it's really a resource.
So Laura, great job. Like the little that you showed us, it seems like I'm of course not a teacher, so you'll have to wait to get the real feedback from the users, but it seems really intuitive and user-friendly and in-depth. So like, thank you so much for all your work on that. And my question was kind of along JP's line, and maybe better for Amy or Diane, but if we're going to include cultural responsive training as an evaluation criteria, it seems like we would want to know which teachers are proactively trying to go out and get help with their lessons and take advantage of these resources and incorporate that into their evaluation. And so that, my question was, are we going to be able to track that or use that in our evaluation metrics?
That personally isn't my desire, but go ahead, Matt. What were you going to say?
Sure. Well, I just think that's a part where when Laura works with our building admins around best practice for the teachers that they supervise and evaluate, then of course the building administrators in charge of those teachers' evaluations or performance would know how best to deliver some PD around that and offer it as a resource. And then also the teachers that may need some more assistance or are having problems meeting that cultural responsiveness standard. And so I was gonna, before you asked that question, Lisa, I was gonna link it to, you know, when JP had asked that question, it's really about making sure we're at a proficient level as we continue to talk about those standards. And as we do standard work, and we've talked about that being a part of our accountability component here, that we want to train up and we want to provide support, but there also has to be an expectation that we're able to do this in an effective way. And so this is a support to do that. And so really we would depend on our principals to work effectively with our individual teachers around that, is if they need that resource or if they're kind of told in a sense that, hey, I need you to check out this resource and we're going to work together to get better around this specific skill. But on the district level, I think, you know, Laura's role is, you know, we really try to provide the training, the support, and give the administrators the tools to help work with their teachers to continue and improve and get better after the initial rollout of it.
Good question. And Laura, I just want to offer my gratitude for the work you've done here. And my thought is, I mean, these materials seem amazing to me and actually relevant to others beyond classroom teachers. And I wonder, I mean, and obviously some are very focused on classroom instruction and curriculum and that kind of thing, but from where you were scrolling through, it seems like some of those materials could actually be relevant to administrators too. And I just wondered if there was a potential leveraging of this toolkit for other scenarios, other training opportunities that might come forward in the district beyond teachers.
Absolutely. So this will go to our entire staff. It's just not the intended audience is just not students. And so they'll all get the link to the Padlet and the password. And the intention is that they, you know, use it as needed. So yes, our peer educators, you know, anyone in our district can access this, and I'll accompany it with, like, I'll introduce it with a Zoom where I'm just kind of recording and going through the different elements so that they can kind of know what's there, and they'll all get that, and then they can decide whether or not this is something that they want to use.
So is it something the board could use?
Absolutely.
Great.
You know, I just assume, you know, you guys get inside information for all of this stuff. So I can send you the link and the password.
Thank you. That would be super awesome. Thank you, Laura. Again, thanks for putting this together.
Any other questions for me? Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Laura. Do we have some other topics under equity, Matt, that we wanted to cover?
One thing I would just let you know, and then see if Chase has anything he'd like to add on top of it, but that ombudsperson position that we've had open, I do not believe we've closed that application process yet, but we've started receiving applications. So just wanted to let you know where we're at on that it's been posted and we've been receiving some applications. And so once that closes, then of course we'll review those and work towards filling that position. And remember, that was kind of something that originated around folks feeling like they're not always comfortable going to the formal complaint procedures or knowing how to navigate that system. And so this person would really work on an advocacy basis on their behalf about how to bring those complaints forward or concerns forward and getting them to the right channels in that regard. And so whether that be that conversation needing to start at the district level or in the building level, but that was really the purpose and role of that position as we heard some concerns from the summer. So we're still in the process of filling that one, but wanted to give an update there. And Chase, I don't know if you have anything to add on top of that in that regard.
Sure, just two things. The closing date is currently the 20th, and I can't give you any breakdown information about the pool since it is open, but we are keeping track of that information and would be happy to share that with the board once that closes or we get further out in the process, so we can bring some of that information back to you. But currently slated to close on the 20th.
Sean, before we leave this, I'd like to ask Amy a little bit more about the DPP review process. Amy, can we get to the point at the end of your work where day-to-day or week-to-week data is looked at each in each building about whether the minor infraction disciplines, the office referral disciplines, are being administered equitably or without disparity or not? That is, can we do something to get away from having to look at this at the end of each year when it's probably too late to do anything? Well, it's obviously too late to do anything for students that year. So is a more frequent review part of what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, those are good questions, Charlie. And certainly when we think looking at our data, we don't want to just have the autopsy data, right? And so currently, as part of our building school improvement plans, there's a formal ask that they enter their office referral data on a monthly basis. And then we're tracking suspension data on a trimester basis. In addition to that, our PBIS teams would be meeting. The core team meets at least once a month, and then the tier 2 or tier 3 team, or some buildings call it the SST, they meet in addition to that. So there's a constant look at the data. Now, whether we're breaking that down in those building level meetings to the degree that you're asking for, we certainly do that. At trimester, we're tracking totals each month, but not necessarily breaking that data out. So that's another thing that we could do each month as well, Charlie. So yeah, I mean, it's too late to do anything about it when you're just looking at it once you get to the end of the year. So I agree with that.
Well, if the board would support a more frequent use of disaggregated disciplinary data, that would make me feel good. So.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing we, connect that or can think about connecting that to, Charlie, is that, right now we've been focused on the action steps, and those action steps, of course, as we outlined those to you, link them to our diversity, equity, and inclusion plan goals. But remember, a part of the updates surrounding that plan, when we talked about doing those quarterly updates, did include some data points. And so that would be a data point, obviously, in that section of the diversity, equity, and inclusion plan that we could figure out a data flow about how that works and how that would come to you guys in a more frequent basis that way too. But I think Amy did a nice job of outlining there how our buildings do use that on a more regular basis. But if it was something the board wanted to see more often too, we could talk about, like I said, that data flow when those updates come from the DEI plan.
Good. Thanks very much, both of you.
All right. Anything else on that topic?
I think that wraps it up for us, Sean, unless there's other questions.
All right. I gave a few seconds of silence there. So we'll move on to our next agenda item and get a return to learn update.
Sure. So the two big items we're going to cover with you guys tonight around return to learn are kind of some of the changes you're seeing there on the COVID dashboard and what those numbers mean, and maybe breaking that down and being able to answer your questions as you've seen those continue to change here as we've had students in the building. And so I'll ask Kristen and Chase to kind of walk you through some of those components. And then the second part, Amy's going to take around when we go back to families here in early November around what's happening at the turn of the trimester. And so I think we'll have Chase and Kristen start with the numbers and get into that conversation. And then we can kind of talk about what some potential next steps are looking like for our community.
Sure, Matt. Good evening again. As Matt said, we'd like to talk to you a little bit about some of the numbers that we've shared on our COVID dashboard over the last several weeks. If you have been following that information, you'll see that the number of positives or presumed positive students in our school has increased significantly since we came into hybrid. And one of the natural questions that has flowed out of that is there community spread in our schools? And we mentioned last week, and we've been working on it the last couple of days, and again tonight, we've not received any reports as of today that any of those cases are associated with spread actually in our schools. Now, that could change. Obviously, we've seen an increase, and so we don't want to be as naive enough to say that there would never be spread in the schools. But as of now, the cases that have been reported, we've not been given any indication, whether that's through our own contact tracing, through our nurses, or through Johnson County Public Health, that they have led to any spread inside the school buildings. And I mentioned our nurses. I do want to pause right there and just give them a big shout out and a huge thank you for all their work. They are, I mean, just working nonstop and putting in some tremendous efforts to help keep all of our kiddos and our staff as safe and healthy as possible. And so if they're watching or listening, I just want them to know that we really, really do appreciate all of the work that they're doing each and every day. They're in tough spots, having really hard conversations, and we're just very thankful that we have them on our team and for all the work that they're doing. And part of the work that they're doing really leads to what our numbers are showing. And that overall number on the COVID dashboard is 68 students that are currently testing positive or presumed positive. And that's the number we want to break down for you this evening. And so Kristen, and Kristen, jump in here anytime, developed a great graphic for us. And I'm going to share my screen right there. And you can see that those numbers, none of those are 68, but the numbers on the top half of the page both add up to 68. And in the left top quadrant, you'll see we're a breakdown between our confirmed positives and our presumed positives. And the reason that we have this is because the Iowa Department of Public Health has told us that we need to track our presumed positives. And presumed positives are defined as anyone that's symptomatic, that we've sent home, that we've not received an alternative diagnosis or a negative COVID test. And maybe the family just decides they don't want to get the test, or we haven't gotten the results from the test. Or like we said, they get an alternative diagnosis, which would be maybe strep throat or the flu. We're getting into flu season. But before we know that, those are all presumed positive. So that number of 68 looks pretty daunting. But as we look at a layer deeper, we see that really it's 14 confirmed positive cases and 54 presumed positives. And so while 14 is still a number that's higher than when we went to the hybrid, it's not as big as that 68. And so we do have 14 presumed positive student cases, but 54 where there hasn't been a positive test, but we don't have any way to rule those out as positives either. And that's looking at our entire student population right now, both the hybrid and the online classes. And so on the top right side, again, we see it adding up to 68, but that 61 of those either confirmed or presumed cases are students that are in the hybrid, and that 7 of those are in our online program, which while that number is pretty small on the online student side, that's good to know, because we want our families to continue to have that open dialogue with us and that open communication about if their students might be positive. Those students in the online program, some of them still participate in extra and co-curricular activities. They live in neighborhoods and they might hang out with their friends that are in the hybrid program. And so there might still be an element of contact tracing that has to go on, even if students are in the online program. And so it's nice for us to be able to have that information. Kristen shared with you a few weeks ago that one reason the dashboard is set up the way it is because health and privacy guidelines prohibit us from really drilling down to a level that would make information identifiable for students. And so we can't give you the school by school breakdown, but we did want to show the board a little bit of information about at a broader scope or landscape of where we're seeing the positive or the presumed positives. And so in that bottom left-hand quadrant, if you're looking at the screen, you see that we've had positive confirmed cases in 8 of our schools and presumed positives across 19 of our schools. Again, so it's not just in one school or one classroom or even just one region of the district. We've had a sprinkling of cases across most of our schools, at least on the presumed positive. And then, as I mentioned a little bit ago about students participating in co and extracurricular activities, we're not just looking at classrooms. we're also looking at those activities as well. And to date, we've had 2 co or extracurricular activities that had to have been shut down for a period of time because of students going into quarantine. And to that, let me know, did it change the screen for everybody to the other piece? We've actually added that as another point under our current closures tab, because we know that it might not just be a classroom or a school, it might be an extracurricular activity. So we've added that as an additional layer on our COVID dashboard to help be as transparent as we can with the information about our students and our staff and the impact COVID's having on our learning each and every day. That's a short kind of overview, but I would open it up to any questions that the board might have.
Chase, this is Charlie Easttown again. This is helpful information, and I really appreciate you and Kristen putting this together for this meeting tonight. One thing I would ask is do you have is there much guidance on how many presumed positives turn out to be actual positives? So is there some kind of overall data for that? Maybe not. If there isn't, I mean,
I don't know. Kristen and Kate's on here as well, and Kate's been kind of our liaison with Johnson. Her and Jessica Jimerson have been our liaisons with Johnson County Public Health. Kate, have we been given any guidance on that?
No, not at this time. That's a question I can ask Johnson County Public Health. There tends to be a percentage. And this is just, we're so new at coming back to school right now, it's hard to know trends.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of my the observations right now is that the confirmed positive number is certainly higher than the number it was 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. And the fact that it seems to be not focused or not concentrated in any, as in a way that can be detected, I guess that's in a way a helpful thing. But to me, it's still an indication that there's something going on that may or may not, that doesn't appear to be related to in-school spread. But to me, these numbers suggest that in-school spread could begin fairly easily at this point, especially if the mitigation efforts, turn out to be not as overall effective, as we want them to be. So what guidance can you give us at this point, Chase and Kate, about how to what to pay attention over the next several days or very, very few weeks?
Well, I can jump in here for him and give him a little think time. I think one thing, Charlie, to consider is, I think these are our numbers in the district, but of course we're still obviously paying attention to what's going on in the county and with those county rates too. And so I think you kind of have to look at them in concert from the aspect of what's happening in the local district, but then what's happening across our county. If we see an increase in the county rates, do we see an increase in our school rates go up? Or conversely, do you see county rates go down and the school rates go down, or do we see a spike but the overall county rate is not increasing? I think trying to look for those similarities and differences as we compare is helpful, and that's why we have the Johnson County information on there as well. But we did want to make sure to break down that confirmed positive versus presumed positive for you, and I think Kate and Chase did a nice job of saying there it might be hard to develop what trend lines look like for that, because it's based on some of the information shared with us. If a family doesn't ever go receive a COVID test or doesn't necessarily share results back, or if we're not able to track that down, I think those are all things that could have some holes into the data a little bit. And so that's why we consider the confirmed and presumed together in that aspect. So with that, I don't know if Chase and Kate had any other thoughts, but I think that would be one thing to pay attention to.
I do, and thanks, Matt, for jumping in there. That's one of the pieces that I'm glad we covered. And the other one is, it's hard to say what to pay attention to, because given what we can share and what we can't share from privacy, Charlie, is we're going to have to kind of relay some of this to you a little bit. I appreciate your observation of saying it's not necessarily concentrated in any one school. I think those are things that we'll watch for, is even if they appear on the surface to be isolated, if we start getting a pocket of a number of actual confirmed, not just presumed cases in one school, that would be an indication that there's potentially a hot spot in that area, whether it's in a school or in a neighborhood. That's something that we would want to start paying attention to. And that goes back to where I started about the work that Jessica and our nurses are doing, and they're trying to look at some of those things. And so I would say that is something that we want to keep an eye on, is not necessarily just that number, but where they are. We could see an uptick of maybe, only 10 over the next 20 days, which would be great. But if those 10 are all in the same building, that's still something we want to pay attention to. So it's not necessarily just the number, it's also a matter of where they're happening. And I know that's hard for the board to monitor because of us trying to maintain that high level of privacy. So it's something we're constantly looking at behind the scenes as we try to keep a good view of what's taking place.
Hey, Matt, I have a question. And first, thanks to the team for the dashboard, this additional information, Chase, that you were just presenting in terms of how you're breaking down the data. I mean, it's clear we're learning a lot, right, as we get into this and track it and start. We're just getting better information and better equipped to manage our way through, is what I'm taking away from the conversation tonight so far. So my question is, and of course we've had inputs from community members on this. I mean, what are your thoughts on when we'd be ready to go back to 5 days a week? I mean, getting out of the hybrid model, and sort of what would you need to see? What kind of data would you need to have to consider making that move back to, move out of the hybrid, or maybe the move out of hybrid for just a certain population of students? K3, I think, has been suggested. And so just curious to hear your thoughts on that, on what data you'd need, and just, what that progression might look like from your standpoint.
Sure, thanks for that, Janet. I think it's a good question there, following kind of just the conversation we had, because like Charlie talked about how we continue to monitor rates, and being new to having kids back in our buildings and having access to some more information or some more conversation with our families about what's going on. I think we're looking for any kind of trends that might happen, and we're collecting that data about the status of COVID. But I think another important component that we need to do that we haven't done here for a period of time is re-engage our families and kind of where they're at from and our staff. I would say families and students, and also our staff, about where they're at comfort-wise with some of these things as well, and what they would like to see from the district, and from an input perspective, to get some of that input again. It's been a significant period of time since we've done that, and so I think that would be an important element for us as far as when we specifically would look at something other than our hybrid plan. Of course, in our metrics and matrix there, we had put at the turn of the trimesters when we consider that. And I know the second component of what we're going to talk about here with Amy tonight is, the date for when families could elect into that option. But I think as we consider the potential for more instructional days or more instructional time in person at the trimester, assuming our rates kind of stay where they've been, because I think that would be the conversation we'd be having at that point. I think we would also need some input from our families in that regard, and also from our staff about where some of the, maybe the challenges are at, or where they're feeling good about some components that way. And of course, we don't, we've said all along, this is going to be a fluid situation, and we don't know what COVID will do in the county or in the community. And so that can change the conversation drastically too. But I do appreciate the question, Janet. And I think, a necessary step, I would say, in that is re-engaging our staff and re-engaging our families again in that conversation.
So what kind of timescale would you be thinking about that kind of survey and gathering of data from staff and families?
Well, I think if that's something the board's amenable to, we'd like to move on that, sooner rather than later. And I think we had had some conversations here internally about, I know Dr. Schultz has done some things with surveying the PK-12 online families around their experience in the program. And so we had begun some conversation this week about when is the right time to go back to our families and ask them some questions, and then trying to also consider that November date about potential for online families to transition into the other continuum of models that would be in front of them. So I think the sooner the better is probably the answer to that.
Thank you.
I'd like to circle back to the active cases. First of all, the dashboard looks great. Thanks for the additional info and the graphics tonight. You guys know I love graphics. My concern is how we are communicating with our teachers who have COVID positive or presumed positive cases, students in their classroom. And I'll tell you, it hit home this week because Jason is at City, and what he got was an email from the school nurse that said, are your seating charts up to date, and are all your kids 6 feet apart from each other? And then it went radio silence. And we didn't know if he had one of the 11 quarantine kids in his classroom, or if it was a positive kid. Do I need to pull my kids out of school? You know, it's a cascading effect. And I think that's going to be common with every single teacher in the district if we're not clearly communicating to them what's going on with the students in their classroom. And I get that we have heightened privacy and we can't point out specific students, but surely there has to be a better median than getting an email that says, are your seating charts up to date? And then no further information.
That point's well taken, Lisa, and I appreciate you pointing out the recognition about the confidentiality piece, but that can't be the answer to everything, right? We need to take care of our staff just like we take care of our students. And we had this conversation yesterday, and I hate to kind of give the, well, we're working on it answer, but as this is so fluid and some of these things are so new, we do continue to work on that. And so we're working with Johnson County to try to get some guidance so we make sure that we comply with what they've told us we can do and can share in terms of contact tracing. To part of your question, and Kristen and Kate help me out here, my understanding is, you know, I hate to look at it as like, well, no news is good news, but for the families of students and staff where we think somebody does need to quarantine or does need to stay home, there is a follow-up to specifically say that, obviously, because we don't want them coming to school. But I understand the other side of it. There's a lot of angst when you're called and said, hey, we need this information from you because you might have been a close contact. And so looking at a way to close that loop, especially with our staff members, when we ask them for that information, but they need to confirm back with them, hey, everything's okay. Thanks for that. You're not a close contact. That's well taken, and something we need to look at how we incorporate that into our process, because, you know, our nurses, all of our staff are working hard every day in our schools. And so we want to make sure that even though we know there's an increased risk, that they feel as comfortable as we can make them, even given these difficult times when they come to work every day. So we'll add that to the equation.
Just going back to the numbers again, I did notice that the percentage of confirmed and presumed positive students that are in the doing the online learning part of our offering is like 90% of the total confirmed positive and presumed positive students. I understand that they're thinking maybe that's because we're much more proficient at detecting confirmed and presumed positive students who are in buildings than we are from the students who are online. I guess I would ask if there's a little bit more that the Health and Safety Committee might want to tell us about that possibility as we go forward here too.
I'm not sure I understood your question there, Charlie. Sorry to ask.
I'm sorry, Matt.
For me, sorry.
Yeah. About we have 68, I think, confirmed and presumed positive students in the district right now. 90%, about 90% of those are in the online student population. which means that, you know, they're in the buildings at some point during the day and in contact with other students. So if we could just make sure that our analysis of why there's that difference in percentages is because we're detecting more confirmed and presumed positive students in the hybrid student population than we are in the online population. Not because there's a difference in the actual prevalence of confirmed and presumed positive students in those two different sets of populations. And I
So
think,
if I'm hearing you right, you're talking about the higher percentage of students that are COVID positive or COVID presumed positive in the hybrid population, and trying to figure out if we almost have like a communication gap with the online students or families.
or, you know, that there's something right. I see
Higher
Kate's
number, kind of
Kate's,
digging into that.
yeah, I see Kate's nodding her head. I'm not sure if that means she understands what I'm
It means
getting
I
at.
understand. I understand what you're asking, Charlie.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily have an answer for you, but
Okay, that's fine. I'm not expecting an answer now.
I think that makes sense.
I think, you know, to me, when I look at data, we always want to understand what the data is trying to tell you. And that means asking a lot of questions. So.
I think one of the things, Charlie, that to speak to that question that we didn't do, let me just pull up that graphic again real quick, is if you look at that hybrid versus online, which is what you were talking about, we didn't tease out the presumptive versus the actual positives. We didn't drill down to that next level, which I think is kind of what you're asking us to do. And I think that we could easily do that and would help probably provide some more data to answer the question that you're asking.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Any more questions on that part? All right, I think we move on to kind of our next piece there, Matt.
Yeah. Okay, great. And so we'll have Amy take that as far as what we can be expecting here in early November.
Yeah, so it's hard to believe that we're actually talking about second trimester already, but our second trimester starts on December 8th. And so as we've backed up and thought about a timeline of when we would need parents to notify us of their decision for a second try, and having that time off for Thanksgiving in there, we have determined that we would like parents to report to us back their decision by November 4th. That gives us about 17 working days to look at what the student enrollment's going to look like, how many changes we have in front of us, and then, you know, placement in classes. So given that, we know that we want the 6th to, we need the November 6th to kind of be that drop dead date, but we're going to ask parents to make their selection by November 4th. And then what we're going to have our buildings do is on November 5th and 6th, so that's a Thursday and Friday, go back into Power School, and they'll be monitoring this all along, but go back into Power School and export out the families or the students that there was not a selection made. And we'll go back and do our best to reach back to those families. So we'll be communicating next week. This week, we're working on getting ready our communication as well as updating the website, both the enrollment tabs as well as the PK-12 online web pages to reflect this information. So we're going to ask parents to go back into Power School like they did in August and to go into the parent permission section. There will be a brand new question in there that's going to ask the same that we did last time. So option A and option B, they'll have the choice between the standard enrollment, which means they could be in any one of the continuum learning models that we would find ourselves in, offsite, hybrid, or onsite, or option B. We know that for some of our families, or maybe even a large majority of our families, they're going to want to stay in the with the enrollment choice that they've already made. We still would like them to make that selection. As we move through and get through November 6th as being when we're going to close this to our families and to our buildings officially, we will default this time not to the standard enrollment selection like we did in August, but will default to whatever their current enrollment status is. We want to make sure that families are aware that, you know, when they're making this selection in Power School, this change won't begin until the trimester, so December 8th. We have a little bit of information in there reminding them that if they need help with it, they can reach out to their building administrator, school counselor, school family advocate. And a question we get often is, what if I've forgotten my Power School login information? You know, we can have them contact their building secretary. We know we need to make it short and sweet, but we also know that there's important information. And so we're doing our best to try to whittle it down and get what we need out there and be consistent with our approach. So with that, I'd entertain questions.
So that's also, so once we get that information, I'm assuming we'll try and work in conjunction with trying to figure out staffing, because I know we have some staff that's doing online or some staff that's doing both, how that will all play out and hopefully give enough time to make that switch.
Yeah, for sure. So those 17 days are critical days for us. And we did it in a little bit more compressed timeline in August, and I took some lumps over it, but we've got a lot to do. You know, we need to see where enrollment lands, not only for each of our individual buildings, for our courses, but where that is landing. You know, is that landing in standard enrollment? Is that online? And where are the potential changes? And I think the thing that we also need to be cognizant of is it could mean a change of teacher assignments, even for our families and for our students who aren't changing their enrollment selection. If everybody stayed put, if everybody determined that they liked the enrollment status that they were currently in, the model that they were currently used, then we wouldn't have to see too much movement. So it's going to be largely dependent on, you know, what our families choose to do. Now, thinking that there might not be any movement, I think that's unrealistic. It's just which way is it going to swing?
So just one more question. Is there any possibility that, say, the numbers come back and the large majority of the folks that's online decide they want to come back second semester, and we have a very small minority of people that want to stay online? Would we still be able to offer that online portion to that small number and still meet their needs, as well as bring a large number of people back into our buildings safely?
Well, I'm going to maybe give a nod to Nick on that. Given the high percentages that we're at with online, it would have to drop fairly drastically for us to say, you know, we couldn't do that. At the secondary level, we've got the edge courses that we could always fall back to. But I can't imagine, you know, we did anticipate, well, what happened at the elementary level? You know, we've got 10 requests for first grade and 10 requests for second grade. And so that's why we went out initially in our language and said we might have to do multi-age classrooms, you know, and then we had just the wealth of interest in that, and we didn't find ourselves there. So it would be hard for me to think that we would find ourselves there, but anything is possible, I guess.
Yeah, I think Amy's right. I mean, I don't think we'll be there, Ruthina. I think the other part of the answer is we need to be able to and have to be able to offer that option. And so it could be more challenging for us to offer that option with the full slate of courses and with some of the things we're able to do with a larger number of students. And so some of the challenges may be more difficult if we see a large number of students move out of the online program, just like they could also be more challenging to offer health and safety mitigation efforts in our buildings with a large number of kids coming back to the buildings. And so I think all of those are important data points for us to consider. And like Amy said, it's a tight turnaround when you look at the amount of days we have to work through that information. And so we need to do that soon. And so when Janet asked that question earlier about, you know, when would we survey our families, we think all this stuff has to ramp up here pretty quickly for us in the next few weeks.
That was going to be my question too. If we supporting certainly that survey, getting it out ASAP, and trying to get a feel for how which way that's going to swing. Yeah, I don't know what to base it on either, but it seems like more people might want to go into hybrid and probably not the other way around.
And I think we have some initial data. I don't think we're ready to share it with you this evening, but I know based on, like I said, Dr. Schultz's survey that he put out, there was some questions in there about likelihood of staying in the online learning program. And so I think that's where Amy's trending a little bit too, that we don't think it's going to be, you know, a drastic number, even though we would see some movement, that we think there's probably a significant number of families that will stay with online learning, at least what was indicated to us in some early responses on that survey, but that's not complete from my understanding yet either.
I just want to say again that the concern that we all share, I think, that we're reaching all the families in the district, especially families whose first language is not English, and families who are not terribly connected or comprehending what they're being asked to consider now. And I'm sure Amy and the staff is going to continue, the building staff especially, going to continue your efforts to include those families in surveying what their thinking is or what their preferences are. And I hope that in some way we can include the information we've talked about tonight in terms of where positive, so the number of positive students we're seeing and the number of presumed positive students we're seeing, so that families that want to know that information will have a chance to, will have it in making their decisions about whether they want online or hybrid choices, make online or hybrid choices. I guess we're all, I certainly would be looking forward to looking at the choices disaggregated again as much as we possibly can at these points, as we're asked to make decisions about what to offer in the second trimester here.
I think that all makes sense, Charlie. Certainly. I think, you know, that was one thing we did in the initial time of the surveying too, was try to push out as much information as we could at that time around return to learn guide and return to learn processes, continuum, health and safety mitigation efforts. And so without trying to overwhelm them with too much repeated information, but also trying to get them pointed in the right direction to have the necessary information they need. So we'll work to do that when we ask those questions.
I just want to throw something out there that I think we have to be a little careful with the words we're using, because I know this came up in the past. Charlie, I'm going to use you as an example because you just said it, where the choice is online or hybrid, and that's not the case. The choice is online or the continuum, and I want to make sure that that's very clear, that it's not online and then only hybrid, because it may be hybrid at the end of or at the beginning of the next trimester. It may be something different than that. So I just want to, you know, as we're talking to other folks out there, we're trying to be very clear with those words and what that means, because I think it has caused some in the past. So I'd like to be very careful, and I don't want to throw you under the bus, Charlie, but since you just said it, it reminded me of that. So I wanted to say that piece.
Well, that's well taken, Sean. And I'm still trying to figure out what all this means too. So thanks very much.
I think that's it for us, Sean, unless there's further questions on return to learn.
So let's see if directors had anything else they wanted to ask. All right, let's move on then. We have a couple of action items for some modified supplemental amounts. I assume Les can speak to one, or we can do them one at a time, or he can speak to both of them together if we want.
You're right, Les gets those, thanks.
Actually, I'll take them both at the same time, even though we would ask the board to approve separate resolutions for each one, please. These are annual requests to the board to request modified supplemental amounts to go to the school budget review to increase our spending authority back for these excess costs in these two programs, the limited English program and the special ed deficit. So it's an annual process done this time each year after the submission of the certified annual report to the state that was due this year on September 25th. So it's based upon our actual numbers that we submit versus what funding has been provided through the funding formula. and our costs exceed those. You know, the limited English program is a program you're all familiar with. The number of kids that we're serving there just exceeds the weighting that you get for that to effectively serve those kids. And special ed is the same way. You know, our costs exceed those that the state provides, and that's an ongoing discussion in terms of state funding that that you've all put on your radar each year that you've been on the board. So if you have any other specific questions, I'll answer those, but that's a kind of a recap of both of those.
So the first one up is the limited English program. Are there any questions from directors on that? All right, if not, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the request for modified supplemental amounts for limited English program LEP costs.
Second.
Any further comments? Okay, Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, and the second one is on our special education deficit. Are there any specific questions on this one from directors? All right, sounds like no, so I would entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt the resolution to approve request for modified supplemental amounts for special education deficit.
Second.
Second.
Okay, Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thanks everyone. Our next item on our agenda is our liaison report for directors. Folks have been very busy. Is there anything that anybody would specifically like to speak to that they've done?
I would not like to speak to anything that I've done, but I would note that we just got an email from Catherine Gertis, who is our student representative for City High, and she is now in the chat. And I know it's totally out of order, but student rep comment is my favorite part of our board meetings. And if we could allow her maybe a chance to give us the update on City, that would be super awesome.
I'm just going to look to see if directors are going to nod their head. Would you like to just do that right now? I see a few heads nodding. All right, so let's go ahead and do that, if that will work for you, Kim.
Hi, I apologize for being so late, but I just want to say that City High, the year is going really well. So far, we have drama planning a virtual production of Little Women to account for safety guidelines. And at City High, we have 7 National Merit semifinalists and 3 commended students. 3 students received a 36 on their ACT. Volleyball won the spike, and homecoming court is also happening safely. And we are currently trying to plan substitute homecoming activities so that we still have student events going on. I just wanted to make that really quick. But thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. All right. After that little detour, was there anything else on the liaison reports that directors like to speak to?
Sean, if I might, this is not directly from my liaison report, but it is from a teacher in the district, and I just wanted to just to talk about it very briefly, only a couple of minutes. I received a card. I don't know how to do this very well, but like this, many of us may have received the same kind of card. It's from Elisa Meggett, who's a social studies teacher at North Central. Actually, Elisa invites new board members to come to her class right after the election and talk to the class. And Lisa and I did that, and probably most of you have done it too. And so Elisa in her card says, "Hi, Charlie. This is thank you for all you're doing and the hard work you're engaging in with the 2020 Return to Learn effort." And she says, "I'm guessing this took more hours than you ever imagined. It's a good guess, Elisa, very good guess. She goes on to say, I wanted to send you some appreciation and share some fun and impactful ICCSD programs with you. And she includes a way to get at a YouTube presentation. Connect you to the meaning of your work. And that meaning is shown by the YouTube presentation, which is videos of the classes that she takes to various places in the county, especially to farms and to agricultural areas. I really appreciate teachers doing this. I know other teachers in the district are just as committed to what they're doing, what they're teaching as is Elisa, and are committed to connecting to their students as is Elisa. But I just wanted to mention this as a real plus to my month this month in terms of being on the board.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Charlie. I did want to mention this, and this seems like the right time. Tomorrow is the first DPO meeting of the year. And ordinarily we would have, assigned some board members or at least asked for volunteers to go, so we weren't getting more than 3 folks there. I will tell you that I was planning on attending and giving a board update, but other board members are welcome to join, but I wanted to make sure that everybody wasn't planning on jumping in and we were going to start breaking some rules. So I'll just throw that out there. Is anybody else planning on attending the Zoom DPO meeting tomorrow over lunchtime?
I was planning on going, but I'll be happy to defer to other members too.
And I was going to say the same thing. I've got it on my calendar, but I'm happy to bow out if others want to attend.
Got it on my calendar and I was planning to attend.
Well,
I can bow out gracefully.
I do not have it on my calendar and was not going to attend. You guys know I like to reserve the evening ones because that works a lot better for my more work schedule.
Yeah, I'm not able to make it either, Sean. But I'm glad you're getting back up and going again. That feels normal to have DPO. It feels good.
Well, I tell you what, probably speaking a little out of school, but I've got several staff members at my work out for COVID reasons, so I'm covering work, and so it actually would be a little more difficult for me to attend the DPO meeting tomorrow. So if Charlie and Lisa and Dromi would like to attend as the 3, you're welcome to do it. One of you has to give a board update though, and there's been about 87 board meetings since the last time they had a DPO, so you guys have fun with that. We've only had one topic pretty much in those 87 meetings, but.
Could I suggest that you designate Lisa to do the?
Oh, no,
report?
see, I was going to designate Romy because I'm sure that she's been like reading up to speed on everything that we've been doing in our 87 meetings.
I'll let you fight that one out tomorrow on the DPO Zoom call.
out in front of everybody, so.
Yep.
We'll do an email. We'll figure it out.
Be there, so.
Say if one of you guys wants to connect with me when you figure it out, or Lisa, I'm happy to talk to you so we don't repeat ourselves between the board update and the administrative team update too. So just let me know.
On that note, I think we can move on to our agenda setting item. If you'll notice, we do not have a special meeting scheduled next week. And we'll keep our fingers crossed that we won't need one. So what we have on there is a draft agenda for the 27th. All the regular stuff on there, along with our discussion on voluntary transfers. We had specifically talked about doing a secondary discussion, but I think we're going to kind of lump everything together, elementary and secondary, as one discussion. So it's a relatively short agenda. So I don't know if, obviously we will keep probably talking about return to learn stuff, but is there other things that folks want to see put on the 27th or in meetings for that matter?
It'd be awesome if we had the survey data by the 27th. I don't know if I'm pushing too fast, Matt, but we're on a pretty tight time scale, as you said. It'd be nice to be able to look at that on the 27th.
Surveys have been responded to at high rates for us, through COVID. And so if we can get it created and pushed out and turned around, we'll sure do that and have those results ready for you. So if we wanted to have a discussion around that, we'll sure try to be ready.
Anything else? All right. I like that. That looks short and sweet, hopefully. On that note, if there isn't anything last minute from anybody, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second? Oh, Janet?
People just, it's too short. They're like, what's up? Gotta go for another hour.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thanks everyone for your time tonight. Appreciate it. We'll
Thanks, folks.
see you next time.
Night.
Later. Bye.